And it's time for episode number 50 of the Press Box Podcast. We're back this week with our golden episode. That'd be 50 episodes, as I said earlier. And in this episode, we want to start talking about college football a little bit more in depth. Touched on it on the last episode, but things are happening now in the news. We've got some conferences canceling their season. So we'll talk about conferences that might play, the ones that have decided not to play, and how that all will shape out for the fans, the athletes, and everybody involved. And we want to touch on baseball as well. They've started playing again since we last had our episode. And we'll talk about some of the stumbling that's happened with a few of the teams and the testing and things like that have hampered some games, as well as some overall takeaways and some individual teams and players towards the end. And lastly, we'll touch on golf slightly as well. The PGA Championship just happened a few weeks ago, so they're in their major season now with the U.S. Open and the Masters coming, and we'll look forward to that. So without further ado, we'll get into the golden episode number 50 of the Press Box Podcast.
Okay, we're back on the Press Box Podcast. We're ready for episode number 50. I'm Ralph Miranda, one of your co-hosts, along with my other co-host, Joseph Miranda. And today, let me step back. It's been a few weeks since we had our last episode discussing the restart of football, college and pro. And we've had a lot of events happen, especially in the world of college football since then. And last time we were on the air with you, baseball had not yet started. It was still a couple days away from starting, and there's been some fits and starts with baseball as well regarding the coronavirus. So that's kind of what we want to discuss today, and I'll bring Joseph in now. And Joseph, give me your early thoughts on some of the things that have gone on since the last time we got together with our listeners.
Yeah, well, we'll start with college football. And I don't have the replay of the last episode in front of me, but I think when we discussed that versus the NFL, I was in the camp that college football is less likely to happen because there's so many more moving parts.
That's correct.
The NFL being one league, and we're starting to see that play out a little bit. Okay,
right.
We've got, you may know, the Big Ten voted to not play the season.
Right.
Pac-12 voted to not play the season. It looks like the SEC and the ACC are pretty set on playing, and the Pac-12, the Big 12 is leaning towards playing, I think, from what I've heard. So,
right.
Which overall is ultimately absolutely ridiculous because it seems to me like it's a pretty set all or nothing thing. Like, you think that, again, there's no governing body like the NFL. Like, I guess the NCAA is, but each school controls their own actions.
That's right.
Okay, and you got conferences or whatever. But how can the Big Ten and Pac-12 see it not fit to play, but the other conferences see it fit to play? Like, you've got, and I saw this, is totally ridiculous. The Big Ten, which includes Iowa,
right?
It's not safe for them to play, but it's safe for Iowa State to play a few miles away because they're in the Big 12.
Right.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I think you touched on some of the frustration that's going on right now. Is that, up until this year, there was never really any problem with there not being a quote unquote governing body over Division I college football,
right.
FBS college football. The NCAA is the governing body over all college sports, with the exception of FBS football. Yeah. Even the national championship playoff is not covered by the NCAA.
Right.
Okay,
NCAA event.
Right. So the NCAA has already said that they're canceling all fall championships, right? Yeah. Underneath FBS. Okay. So you're right. When something like this happens, you have 5 conferences that are all independent making their own decisions. So the big question now is, going forward, should there be a governing body? Should there be some governing body set up to put together a plan that would help all of them play or all of them not play if that's the route you want to go? You know?
I think there should be, and that's the interesting topic too. Is kind of where it goes from here, because you've heard some talk about the SEC is going to recruit or team up with the ACC this year and build a super conference. Well, right. I see a scenario in the future, maybe not too distant future, where college football kind of separates from the NCAA, does their own thing. Then they can talk about their own. They can do their own TV deals, pay the players if they want to pay them. But I think that's where it might be going, and probably should be going, because it's just ridiculous that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 would cancel their seasons.
It is pretty ridiculous. I mean,
just look around the environment and say, okay, talk to the other conferences. If the SEC can play, you can play. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Well, and then you throw in the factor that, of course, the overall umbrella to these decisions was, well, we're trying to keep the health and safety of the athletes in mind. Okay, but as many coaches have said, and some of the players have said, these kids are safer actually under the umbrella of their college football team and university than they are going back to their homes and their cities and hanging out with their buddies and whatever it is they may do. So that doesn't really fly. And I'm sorry, but it becomes a political decision. I mean, it's basically a political decision, and that's exactly what it is. I mean, you've got one. Every time, it's kind of like point and counterpoint. I mean, the ACC medical doctor, the one who they go to for advice in the ACC, says it's safe to play. Well, right away, the Big Ten medical guy comes out and says, no, we have proof, or we have studies that show that it could cause this particular side of it. So it's like they're trying to outdo each other instead of getting together and saying, let's look at the real data. I mean, let's look at the actual scientific data and see that, the possibility of this becoming something serious is very minuscule. And by taking college football away is not really proving anything, and that's just the way I feel. And what you're going to have happen is this is going to hurt if the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 end up playing a full season with minimal interruption, and they have some sort of a national championship, okay, it's going to hurt the Big 10 and the Pac-12 going forward. I think it is. But we'll see.
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit before, but what you heard, I think it was the Nebraska coach said he's ready to leave the Big Ten, or he's ready to play wherever. Like, what actions do these Big Ten schools have? Can they take, like, to just leave the conference? I'm sure there's some type of contract that would tie in there,
Yeah.
Because I mean, all the coaches and probably a lot of the athletic directors want to play. Like, Harbaugh came out with a big statement about he wants to play at Michigan. Well, why don't all these teams just leave the Big Ten and leave them with nothing?
Well, I guess they could. I mean, but you've got to remember that the ultimate decision lies with the president of the university, and I guess in conjunction with the athletic director, right? Yeah. To whether or not they want to stay in the conference. Yeah. So most of these presidents are going to lean to the side of canceling football. It's just it's really weird. I read another article that really kind of totally blew me away. You always hear about how much money college football contributes to the bottom line, but I read this article that said that actually, I think it was Clay Travis who actually wrote the article, which was interesting, that if you look at the budgets of some of these major universities, the revenue they bring in from football barely pays some of their expenses. It does, but they still come out a loss. They take in more revenue actually from the endowment and the donations they get from wealthy alumni and wealthy contributors. So it's basically, his premise was that these presidents don't really care about football. They don't really see the overall need of football, which is really kind of interesting. Now, that may be on a school-to-school basis. I mean, I don't know, some of them may. But you'd think that they'd want to play football. Now, the NCAA is hurting because they lost a lot of money over the loss of the basketball tournament, and they're going to lose money some of the loss of these games that are going to happen this year. Yeah. But these schools, maybe they don't feel the pressure. I mean, the presidents, maybe they don't feel the pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point. Another thing that doesn't make sense is a lot of these. Every school's going to differ a little bit, but I think the majority of all these schools are going to have people on campus this fall.
They are
having classes. Maybe it's not every day or whatever, but they're going to welcome all the students back. Well, how's that different from playing football?
It's not.
Your average student in the student body is not going to be tested every day.
Correct.
The football players actually know if they have it or not because they're probably going to test them in the athletic department. Mm-hmm. So if a guy tests positive, theoretically he'd be out for this week's game. So you're not going to have anybody on the field that has it.
Right.
So it's just another way. It's ridiculous. It's okay for your average student to get it. Let's come back to campus, whatever. But
well, again, I mean, here's the question that I want answered. Okay, I mean, and nobody's willing to answer this question. I don't hear it answered anywhere. Okay, 11 years ago we had the H1N1 virus. It affected 60 million Americans so far, this virus may have infected more Americans. Maybe we just don't know because they haven't been tested yet. But so far, I think the cases in the United States haven't even reached 6 million yet. So that's 60 million with the H1N1 11 years ago. Almost 150,000 people died from the H1N1. I believe is the correct number. Nothing stopped. Okay, Nathan can check that for us, but nothing stopped. All right. The economy didn't stop. There was no talk about stopping college football. There was no talk about any of that. Okay, back in the 80s, when the AIDS virus, the HIV virus, all right, they found that it was transmitted through blood. Right, it was a blood-borne disease. Okay, and it was a death sentence back then. If you contracted it, you were going to die. Okay. They didn't stop college football, and we all know, anybody who's ever played football knows that there's an excellent chance that you're going to get somebody else's blood on your body. I mean, that's just the nature of the game. And the only rule they put in place was that you had to change if the referee saw blood on a uniform, you had to go to the sidelines and change that jersey or pants or whatever it was that you had the blood on it. So my point is, no one's willing to say, why is this different? Okay. Is it all right? Let's say it is more contagious, but it still doesn't make it any different when you look at the numbers of how many people have died, what the death rate is. All right, and that's the thing that makes me believe that a lot of this is political, and we won't get into that, but a lot of it is political. Nathan, do you have an answer for me?
On the CDC's website, cdc.gov, talking about the H1N1, it says that from April 12th, 2009 to April 10th, 2010, so roughly a year.
Roughly a year.
It says the CDC estimated there were 60.8 million cases in the U.S. And 12,469 deaths in the U.S.
Okay. All right. Well, I was way over on the deaths. Okay.
I think 150,000 is what they're saying for coronavirus.
Yeah.
Cases?
No, deaths.
150,000?
Right now, yeah. Right now. Maybe that's where I had my number wrong.
Well, yeah, it says that additionally the CDC estimated that 151,700 to 574,400 people worldwide died from the
Okay, all right.
During the first year it circulated.
Okay, all right, during the first year. All right. Well, that 150,000 was worldwide. Okay, all right. But anyway, the point is, it was still a very contagious disease, all right? And we still had a lot of problems with it. So, and I don't want to get into all the political ramifications right now, how they're counting cases and how they're counting deaths and all that other stuff, because that's not the
numbers don't really matter.
The numbers don't matter, right?
Like you said, the point was that there was a pandemic.
Right, that's correct. There's been other pandemics, right?
And they played football.
That's right.
Or the AIDS, which I think that was a pandemic, and they played football.
That's correct. So really, we should be playing football, okay? Or, as you said, get together, either play or don't play. Yeah. I guess the thing that frustrates so many fans, too, is that the Big Ten, just less than 1 week before they decided to cancel it, put out a schedule. Yeah. Okay? So the point is, nobody had a plan, is what I'm saying. Nobody sat down. They knew this virus from March, right? They should have sat down and said, what are we going to do to be ready for college football, if we can be ready?
Yeah, like I'd have almost more respect if they came all together and said, nobody's playing, which I think is ridiculous, but okay, at least it just makes you look more ridiculous when half the teams play and half don't.
Right.
Last thing I want to touch on about this is people are like, I haven't heard anything official from the Big Ten. These people are like, let's play in the spring. That's absolutely absurd. I think there was the Purdue coach came out and was like, well, yeah, he put together some plan. We could play a 10-game schedule in the spring, in on this date, and then start next fall in October. Well, then, you're compounding it, making it worse.
Exactly.
You're just affecting next season now, which I said you should never do.
Right.
So if you're one of these conferences that doesn't want to play, you just have to bite the bullet and not play at all.
Right.
Come back next fall.
Well,
the spring is ridiculous.
And you're also not going to have your top athletes, your NFL prospects are not going to play in the spring.
Yeah.
Why would they do that? Yeah. I mean, that's the most, because then you got the NFL involved. Is the NFL going to move their combine? Probably not. Is the NFL going to move their draft? Probably not. Yeah. So why would you play in the spring if you've got an NFL career in front of you? Yeah. And so they're hurting themselves. And then if they try to play in the spring and then try to play again next fall, and let's say the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC play this fall, and play next fall, you're hurting yourself next fall when you start competing against these other teams. So,
no one's going to play in the spring.
No, they're not. You're right.
And
no major FBS.
No.
These players from the Big Ten and Pac-12 that are NFL prospects, but not like slam dunk first rounders. Like they didn't finish last season as one of the top guys in their position. They're going to get hurt by this because GMs and coaches are going to see tape on guys, and they're going to go to the ACC and SEC, the guys that play.
Exactly.
All right, it's not unless you're those handful of guys that you're coming into the season as like a no-brainer first pick.
Right.
Then sitting out doesn't hurt you because all you could have done is hurt yourself this season.
Right.
But that's a lot fewer guys than guys that we're gonna make some
need to have a good year.
Yeah, need to have a good year to improve the draft position. Yeah.
Right, and then what about recruiting? I mean, in other words, how are you going to recruit? I mean, that's another thing. I mean, and then also from a recruiting standpoint, of course, this may not affect it at all, but if you're a recruit, would you want to go to that conference?
No.
I mean, considering what they did, I mean, they may do it again if there's another pandemic at some point in time.
Or next time they have a recruiting trip or whatever, who knows if the coronavirus, what the status of it is, it may still be like, well,
exactly.
What's next year going to be like? You're going to have...
Exactly.
The top recruits who are, especially they don't care about school. Their main focus is getting to the NFL or whatever. They're gonna think, hey, the SEC, these conferences, they care about football. That's where I want to go. We don't want to go to the Big Ten. I may lose a season.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. Well, I think what you're ultimately going to see from this, I mean, it already started even before this pandemic, was players pushing for compensation through the sale of the merchandise with their number on it. There's already been movement in the courts to allow players to profit from their likenesses or any. So I think I still think we're moving to a point where the top 5 conferences are going to end up with some sort of players' unions and some sort of payment plan, and they may even separate from the university and say, this is a football operation, and they're going to make their own decisions when it comes to football. And that's what it may come to.
Interesting. The athletic department was a separate.
Yeah.
They make their own decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what it's coming to.
I wouldn't mind seeing it.
I think it's even. I mean, to me, it's even worthwhile. And I said this many years ago. It's even worthwhile for someone to come into a university, a player, and choose their path. Do you want to go the academic route, which means that you're a quote unquote student athlete, or do you want to go the football route, which means that you're just playing football?
Right.
I mean. Now there are ups and downs and pros and cons to both of those decisions, but
honestly, let's say you go the football route, and let's say after 2 or 3 years, it's obvious it's not going to work out as you expected.
Right.
You could always just switch to the other route, and then let's say you're on scholarship for those 3 years, but then switch to the other route and spend 4 years there. Now you're paying for your school, right?
Exactly.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think
you can stay there and just switch the route.
Yeah, I think it's a farce. I mean, it really is a farce, and I think it's starting to get exposed as such, and. We'll see.
Another thing about recruiting that you might have mentioned it, but another thing that would hurt the Big 10, Big 12 if they don't play and other conferences plays with recruiting is, these colleges use their home games as big recruiting kind of trips for players, right? They bring in these high school athletes on the sideline. They show them how the practices work, what game day is like, and if they only have a handful of schools to do that with this year, they may, let's say you're decide between, let's say you're like a junior or whatever in high school, decide between Ohio State and Clemson. Well, if Clemson brings you out for a game day this year, and Ohio State's not playing, that might swing your and you commit to Clemson.
It's still gonna be affected because they rely on their little game day atmosphere with the fans and stuff. There's probably gonna be no fans but
that's true. But at least I guess that's true. That's a good point.
Well, there'll probably be no fans for a while, and I really still think that, and again, it all depends on which schools have planned correctly, but. You could have fans in the stadium if you social distance them the proper way, right? I mean,
South Carolina, some AD said that maybe or something.
You have a lot of fans,
huh?
You have a lot of fans.
Sure, you could. I mean, you just have to make sure that you do it the right way if you want to do it.
If your stadium seats 90,000, which I'm sure there's quite a few that
45.
do, you can have half that. You have 45,000, which is like not. That's kind of like an okay crowd at an NFL game. That's like almost a.
You spread them out, yeah.
That's probably a pretty full crowd at an NFL game, right? 45,000.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, it's as I said before, football needs to be played, and I really think that whoever's behind all this, whether they're making a good decision, a bad decision, a political decision, or non-political decision, it's going to hurt those people those people who have decided to cancel, I think, are going to feel the ramifications of this down the road, and I really believe that's going to be the case. So, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, I really feel bad for the athletes. I mean, because they're the ones who are getting shafted in this whole deal. Because look at all the work. I mean, our producer Nathan knows. I mean, the work you put in to play football from the time the last season ends to the time the next one starts, and now the rug is just pulled out from under them. What are they supposed to do? I mean, what are they supposed to do? There's no way you can keep that same level of weight training for another 4 months. I mean, it's hard to do. Yeah. That's
ridiculous.
I don't know.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about baseball. Again, last time we had our episode, or last episode, they hadn't started playing yet, but they have started playing now. It didn't go out for a great start with the whole Marlins deal. Which my point was, if you're going to have a season. Don't worry about that stuff, because guys are probably going to test positive.
Right.
Have your 40 man or however your alternate training guys ready to go, fill in if they need to. You can't just start canceling games and have some team play the full 60, some teams play 46.
Right.
And this is ridiculous. So I don't think the MLB had a great plan of how they were going to handle positive tests.
No, they didn't. I mean, and then there was that rumor. Of course, I guess it wasn't a rumor, but you never know, that these Marlin players who contracted it when they were in Atlanta and they had gone to a strip club. That's not a very smart thing to do, right? If that's what in fact happened.
That must be a team-by-team thing, because I just saw something where 2 Indians pitchers got suspended by the Indians and sent to their alternate site because they left their hotel on the road and went out with friends.
Okay.
I guess you're not even allowed to leave their hotel.
Well, but that shows you the farcical nature of all this. Is that, I mean, it's impossible to keep players. I mean, how are you going to prevent people from contracting? If this virus is that contagious, how are you going to keep people from contracting it? I don't understand how you're going to do that. I mean, now they're saying that take tomorrow night's game. Well, of course, by the time people listen to this, it'll have been a couple nights before. But as we're sitting here, the Cardinals-Pirates game, I think today is the one that's in jeopardy because 2 Cardinals players tested positive. All right. Well, I mean, do you really need to suspend a game because of that? I mean, I don't think you do. I mean, but again, I don't think anybody really knows what they're doing. I mean, we were watching, Nathan and I were working out early in the gym yesterday before you got there, and I was watching the NFL Network. This shows you how farcical this whole thing is, and I pointed it out to Nathan, is that they showed the Buccaneers practice. Of course, you had the coaches and the people spraying water and stuff had masks on. But then you saw some coaches going through a drill with the mask pulled down to their chin. And then there was another one where they didn't have masks on. Well, if you're going to do that, what's the purpose of wearing a mask? You see what I mean? So that's what I'm saying is it's farcical. Either you play or you don't play. None of this in-between stuff, because the in-between stuff, and I'm sure that's the way it was in baseball, is what's causing the positive cases, if you want to look at it that way. So it just doesn't make any sense to me, really. I mean...
But... Another thing that shows you, that the virus is overblown is that, what was it? It was like 17 or 18 of the Marlins players tested positive.
Right.
Well, now they're all playing again, and they just won last night.
Right.
Well, it's like, because they got a cold for a few days.
Right.
So ridiculous.
Right.
So they're, I want to bring this up later, but talking about guys possibly hitting 400 this season. Charlie Blackmon's hitting 472 as we sit here right now.
Right.
He had coronavirus in the little pre-camp thing. So, well, he was out for 2 days with a sneeze, maybe, or he did, and then now he's leading the league in hitting. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Well, I agree with you, but let's say this for all our listeners out there: who, if someone has a relative that's contracted this, or maybe one that has died, let's say this. All right, I agree with you. For the very large majority, especially of athletes.
That's what I meant.
Okay, yeah. No, I know you did. I just want to clarify it. Especially athletes. The large majority, there's a very, very high probability that you will either not have symptoms, have very mild symptoms, or have like cold-like symptoms or whatever, and you'll be fine, okay? But if you are elderly, especially over 65, even if you're young and have a weakened immune system, or a pre-existing condition or heart trouble or diabetes or anything, yes, it can be a very deadly and troublesome disease. We know that. But when we're talking about athletes, I think we're overblowing it. Just what you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
And coronavirus and no coronavirus, when they come to camp each year, they go through rigorous physicals. So it's known whether they have some type of condition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if they do,
Right.
set them aside.
Right. Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean, and I think that's what needs to be, that's what's missing in this whole thing. And that's what bothers me the most, is that I think it's all, those who would like to do it are playing on some of these things to make it look worse than it really is, you know? And that's the problem, I think, that we have here. But it is what it is. And I think baseball is going to stumble down the stretch. I think they're going to finish their season. I think they're committed to doing that somehow, some way.
They're going to do it at this point.
But I don't know how you're going to do stuff like, how are you going to make up these games that you're postponing?
Well, I think they're going to try to play some doubleheaders, but
Okay.
Worst comes to worst, they'll go by winning percentage in terms of how they finish.
All right. Maybe that's the case, but I don't know. I mean, either way, it's a lost season, and I don't care who wins the championship. To me, it's not a real championship.
You can't take that championship seriously. I mean,
No.
I don't know.
And I don't care who it is.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, even if it's my favorite team, the Yankees, I'm not counting it as a championship. Of course, they will, but I mean, to me, it's worthless.
Well, yeah, it's talking about winning percentage championships. If you look at kind of the baseball part of this right now, you've got the Cubs at 13-4, highest winning percentage here. Let me see,
The Yankees are 13-5, aren't they?
13-6.
Okay.
And you got Oakland at 14-6, 700 winning percentage. So those are your top two in each league there. Expanded playoff this year, right? Is that
Right? I
okay?
think so.
So, which is ridiculous. Everybody's going to make the playoffs.
Of course.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. Do you think somebody hits 400 this year? Like I said, Charlie Blackman for Colorado is hitting 472.
He's hitting 472.
Huh?
He's going to lose 72 points on his average and go below 400 with
Well,
10 games left.
It's possible
He only has 79 at bats.
Yeah.
Or 80 at bats.
when you have that few of at bats.
That's what I'm saying. That's why he'll do it.
No, yeah, but the reverse is also
right.
true. If you have 70, only that if you go 0 for 4,
Well, that's the thing. He coming into last night, he was hitting 500. He was 34 for 68. He went 0 for 4 last night.
dropped 28
Okay,
points.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Now
If you're
once you get up to
you drop more.
Once you get up to 400, 500 at bats, then it doesn't
Yeah.
affect it as much.
Okay.
See? So, but he may still do it. I mean, who knows?
I think somebody probably will. I mean, how many games do they have left now? Roughly.
Well,
Well, if you
some
look
teams
at-
have 40 left.
Yeah, it's about 40 to 41.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depends. Yeah. What would you?
I do admit, I said that neither baseball nor basketball are going to play a game. Looks like they both have.
At least one. Yeah.
I'm still not sold that they're going to both finish their seasons and name a champion. I'm not
I think basketball will.
Basketball probably, they're going to learn under the radar. They're just kind of playing their games. But baseball had a meeting that one weekend. They basically met to see if they want to continue the season. They decided to. I don't know how.
Right.
I don't know what the deal was. But my point is, they're already talking like they may not finish the season.
Well, I think they are at this point.
I think now they are.
What if a whole other team
Well,
gets ravaged by coronavirus?
That was like, remember this Marlins thing happened over the first weekend of the first series. So
Right.
that was just a little overreaction. Like, well, maybe we'll just cancel this thing. But you play 2.5 more weeks. I think they're committed to.
Yeah, because there's guys who are better. You said they're playing it. What if another team gets it again? What are they going to do?
Well, the Cardinals have started to get it a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So
And you said they might not play today. So that's my point. Is who knows if that escalates and they say we're not going to play anymore.
Well,
Because they realize too, like you all said, they realize it's a lost season. They realize the champion doesn't really mean anything.
right.
So they're probably like, what do we lose if we cut the season?
Right.
Nothing. We lose the lost season anyways.
I'm just saying I don't think they're going to do it.
Yeah. I don't think they will either. But you're going to have people. You're going to have people test positive. I mean, first of all, I believe that probably a whole lot more Americans have it or have had it than the numbers tell us. They say 5 million have had it, but those are the ones that tested positive. Some had it before March because I believe the virus was here, since last fall, and some have not been tested. Some have had mild symptoms or no symptoms, and there's no reason to go get tested. So it's probably more prevalent than people think. So anytime you're testing, you're going to have people get it. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, there's just no way around it.
What are your thoughts on the no fans aspect of baseball? Like a lot of the teams are putting the little cardboard cutouts of people.
I think that's ridiculous.
Some teams do it better than others. Like it looks weird sometimes.
Well, it depends what they're doing it for. They're doing it to make it look like there's fans for the people at home and the players. If that's the case, you need to cut it out like waist high. Like some teams do that. It looks almost like realistic. There's some teams do big blown up heads, which looks ridiculous. But again, unless they're doing some type of fan event where like get your face on TV, you're gonna want to see your face. So you put it as big as you can. And I wonder how they choose. It looks like they're just random fans. I wonder if it's you pay for that. Teams are obviously selling advertisements though. Like some of these, they put these tarps over big swaths of seats that have like advertisements on them.
Right. Well, that's probably the better thing to do. And plus, in today's technology, why couldn't they CGI some real fans from a previous game into it?
I think Fox, their Saturday broadcast, CGI some fans. Or they're trying that or something.
And then here's another farcical thing. I was watching one game the other night. I forget which one we were watching. And they had those big-headed cardboard things in the stands. Well, one girl had a mask on, and two people right next to her had no mask. Isn't that a violation of... Aren't they sending the wrong message right now? I mean, so, you either put everybody in a mask or spread them out between seats. So it's such a farce.
Unless they're doing that fan stuff to, just get some excitement for the fans since they can't go to the games. If that's the case, fine. But if they're doing it for broadcasting, do you really care if it looks like there's fans? I don't care.
I don't care.
I mean, if you like baseball and you want to tune in to watch the Cardinals and the Pirates, do you care if it's empty? You're just watching the game. No one watches a baseball game to look at the crowd on TV. Right. So why does it matter if there's no crowd?
And here's another point that we talked about too. A couple times we tuned in to watch a game and it said this game has been blacked out in your area. Well, somebody needs to answer the question for me. How can you black out a game when there's no fans allowed in the stadium?
Ridiculous.
I mean, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Because typically you black out a game to incentivize people to go to the game.
Go to the game. That's correct. Yeah. So
my thing though is even when it's not coronavirus season, you mentioned they may black out a game in another state, right? Like in other words,
you may still get the Reds blacked out.
Yeah, maybe.
When people in Tennessee are going to drive to Cincinnati, it's blacked out. I guess we'll just drive to Cincinnati to watch it.
Yeah,
they should only black it out in the city that you're in.
I agree with that.
Or
that's
county,
what the NFL does, I think. But I don't understand. I don't know. It just doesn't make much sense to me. But who knows? But I think baseball. I mean, baseball is just hoping against hope that they can get through this thing, one way or the other, and they probably will in some fashion or form. But it's ridiculous.
One thing I got to pull up some stats here.
And I think as much as I'm not an NBA fan, I think they had the best plan, and of course their sport is more conducive to it. It's easier to do.
You got 12 guys.
You got 12 guys. All you need is one arena. You went to Disney World, which really was a smart move. You keep them in a bubble if you can. So that's probably the best way to do it. But it's hard for other sports to do something like that. It's hard to put football players in a bubble or baseball players.
You need so much more space. And you need so many more people to keep track of. So.
Right. So,
imagine, I heard do they bring in food, or they just cook the food at the Disneyland kitchens or Disney World kitchens?
I think they have approved restaurants that
do bring in food to them. Okay, imagine trying to bring in food to a football team. You need a lot of food. It'd be a logistical nightmare.
It would be. You're exactly right. I mean,
another thing to touch on baseball here. We talked about the Astros loving this, which they are, no fans. But let's look at some of these stats here for some guys. All right, you have Jose Altuve. All right, right now hitting 187.
Right.
You have George Springer right now hitting 188. Mm-hmm. Alex Bregman, who's in the MVP conversation last year, hitting 250.
Right.
A lot harder to hit when you don't know what pitches are coming. That's all I'm going to say.
That's true. Yeah. That's very true. It is.
And no one's there to call them out on because there's no fans.
Right.
And they're still getting thrown at.
Yeah, they've gotten into 2 fights this season.
I love how they get thrown at stuff, and then they get upset, why are you throwing at us? And they get into a fight. Just take it. Don't you know why they're throwing at you? Yeah. Don't you know that you kind of deserve that?
Right.
Just go back to the dugout.
Right.
What do they have to get mad about, the Astros?
They're just, I don't know.
Why are they upset that people are going after them?
I still think that's the best thing you said right there was that without knowing what pitchers are, it actually, this really hurts them even more that they can't hit without, no, that's funny. That really is pretty funny.
Yeah, the best case scenario for them would have been no fans, which they got.
Right,
and then play just as well, which that's not happening though.
Right.
They got half of the the bad turn. They're not playing as well, so it looks bad. But at least there's no fans.
Yeah, exactly.
If they were hitting this though in a regular season with fans, they'd never hear the end.
They'd never hear the end of it. That's exactly right. Yeah.
All right. Do you want to touch on golf at all?
Yeah, I think golf is another sport that actually came out smelling like a rose in this deal, and next to basketball, it may be more than basketball. It's the easiest one to play.
Yeah,
in fact,
I said this never should have stopped.
You said they never should have stopped, and you're exactly right. I don't see why they quit. I really don't.
Golf's one too, where you could actually have the athletes, if you want to use that term, wearing the mask while they play, because they're just standing there swinging the club.
You need to, but like I saw in a commercial that like promoting golf, it says the sport naturally enforces social distancing.
Exactly.
You're supposed to give the guy space in the tee box, give him space in the green.
Well, I'm just saying, if you were going to never stop though, and you really felt bad during the height of it,
right?
They can wear masks. They're just walking around and swinging. I mean,
right.
You don't get that out of breath playing golf.
The only thing they needed to do. They needed to maybe stop for a week or two just to put in plan how we're going to test. That's all. Yeah. But they didn't have to stop for 4 months like they did. Okay, and now you're seeing that even though they're not allowing fans into the events, watching it on TV, it doesn't look any different to me. Really, I know. Now the really interesting thing is going to be the Masters. They've already said they're not allowing fans into Augusta National. That's going to be interesting because you know when they come up 18 and you got all those fans back there, and it's actually going to be different for the players too, because when you think about it for a minute, you're going to be hitting shots into a different scenic background. I mean, depth perception and things like that come into play as well. So it'll be interesting, but I think golf is fine. I think they've played one major already. They didn't have any hitches. Seems like they're not getting any positive tests anymore, so they seem to be doing pretty well.
Do these courses, like the Masters, all those grandstands they have, do they leave those up? Would they leave those up?
No.
They just wouldn't even put them up.
No, wouldn't even put them up.
It'll probably look a lot different. The
It'll look a lot different, yeah.
Because I've seen pictures of some courses, like when they're not, like pictures of a course they might just play the U.S. Open. And then you see pictures laid with all that stuff down or something, and it looks different.
Totally different. Yeah, I mean, if you look at a picture of Augusta National, look at the 18th hole.
It probably looks weird.
It looks totally weird because they don't have the grandstands up.
And that stuff's not always there, right? They don't build.
No, they put it up just for that tournament, and then they take it back down again. So yeah, it's going to be it'll be different, especially at Augusta National where you won't be able to hear the roars across the course because the way the course is situated. But it'll be interesting. But I think golf's in good shape. I don't think they have any problems at all. And basketball probably won't have any problems either unless somebody breaks the bubble and does something stupid. But I think the NFL, that's going to be the key. If the NFL can pull this off without any problems, and they're going to have some tests. Okay, I mean, let's face it, they're going to
like
some
positive tests. Yeah. In fact, they've already come out and said that they're going to test players every day until September 5th, is what I read. And September 5th is the Saturday before the first game on the following Thursday night between the Chiefs and the Texans. And then I think they're going to test them on a weekly basis. So I think they're going to be okay. I mean,
if somebody, I don't know if they've said this, but if somebody has it, do they test them the next day? Because they're probably still going to have it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess you have to know when they don't have it anymore, so you have to keep testing them.
Well, that was one of the problems in baseball, I think, was they tested somebody, and then I think the protocol they have is they test you, you go into quarantine,
and
then they test you again.
Yeah.
And when they tested him again, they were negative pretty quickly after, which said that it probably was a false positive. So you're going to have false.
That's why if you test them every day and you get a positive test, the next day you could test them and you get a negative test, which maybe there's a false positive.
Right.
Instead of just quarantine for 14 days. And
I think that's what some of the times they're doing. Yeah, because some players have been right back at it.
Yeah.
And then you got all this contact tracing crap. In other words, like if somebody tests positive, if you're not in a quote unquote bubble, then you got to find out, okay, who did they interact with? Okay, because now that person could have it and could be passing it on. So,
well, like they did in baseball, though, the Marlins team had it, right? A lot of players,
right?
And then not only did they cancel their next game, right, but they canceled the games of the team they played in the previous series, who was playing a new team now because they just played the. Well, like you said, that's fine in baseball if you cancel a game or a series, but in football, let's say it ravages one team. And they don't know until the following week.
Right.
And they cancel their upcoming game. Well, they're going to have to cancel the game of the team they just played next. You know what I mean?
Correct.
If the Jets if the Jets play the Dolphins one week, and then the next week they find out the Jets players have it, so they cancel their game with the Patriots, but then the Dolphins are going to have to cancel their next game against the Giants.
Right.
And if you get multiple teams canceling games,
so
you can't.
All right, so before we end, you said, I think it's going to go out without a hitch. They're going to play every game as scheduled on the schedule. Nathan says no.
Look,
go ahead.
I'm not saying that. Look, every team may play all of their scheduled games, but it's not. They will not play. They will not play every game on the date it's scheduled at the location it's scheduled at all the way through the season. Okay. It's either they either have to take 2 weeks off totally from football and come back. Something's going to be different. They're not just going to week 1, week 2, and play all their games and the season's over. Everybody, it's not going to happen. Something's going to happen. All right. Something's going to be different. Like I said, maybe every team plays all 16 games. Yeah. But it's not going to be as it's laid out in the schedule. Or maybe one team has to play at a neutral site or a different stadium or a different time of day. Something's going to be different.
What do you think? You're the dissenting here. Deciding
what would lead you to believe, if you're looking at football as just the sport of football, what else in the sport of football right now would lead you to believe the NFL would have no problems with this? College football, half of them are canceling. High school football is a mess all over the country.
But here's
what makes you believe the NFL is going to go off without a hitch?
Here's the interesting thing, though, is that before I give you my opinion, I think college football wasn't supposed to start till the third week of September. They'd moved everything back, and so far they'd started working out, but I don't think they've even gotten into the majority of the working out, and we're canceling, and we don't really have a lot of positive tests in college football. The NFL's in camp now. They've been in camp for 2 weeks, if not more. And you're not hearing a lot of, hey, we got a lot of guys testing positive, okay? So either way, what's going on? Now, I say all that to say, bottom line, I think I kind of sided with Nathan a little bit, that I don't think it's going to go off everything the way it was supposed to go off.
Just like it's going to, except with no fans.
But I also think that something's going on here, and I think that maybe the NFL is got it right, and it's really, that's the way it is, and the other stuff is all the political stuff with the college athletes and all this. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, let's wait and see it week 1, week 2, week 3. If we get through those weeks without any problems, then that's going to tell me something's going on here, that it was a political.
I guess, but I'm even thinking it could be week 10, nothing happens, and all of a sudden, even something that's minor, like I said, all of a sudden they have to move a game to a different date, or they have to play at a different stadium.
Well, but here's a
different. In other words, a home game for somebody, they have to go to their away side.
Here's the thing that makes me think that it's overblown. Which you had said this a little bit too. Is what did we hear about 3 weeks ago, 3 to 4 weeks ago? Everything you heard on the news media, everything you read about on Twitter was, Florida, Arizona, and Texas. People are 15,000 cases a day. People are dying in the streets, okay? I haven't heard anything about those states now. So either it's gotten better or it's still the same. But my point is, now it's all focused on something else, okay? So my point is, if those states, if the virus is really that bad, then we should still be hearing about it in those states. Which leads me to believe that you're not going to hear that either football is covering it up well, or it's really not as bad as we think it is to play football. Mm-hmm. So there's so many variables involved here that you don't really know if you're getting the truth or not. But I tend to agree. I guess if I had to side, I'm going to side a little bit with Nathan's opinion that I just don't think it's going to go off 100% without a hitch. I think they'll play all the games, but I think somehow there'll be some kind of interruption somehow, somewhere.
Yeah, there'll be an interruption. That's a good way to put it.
Or an alteration, maybe not an interruption, but an alteration.
After a week, I don't know, roughly 8 or 9 should be all in the clear.
It'll be in the clear.
Why would that be the case? Who's to say that a group of handful of guys can't get COVID-19 in week 12?
We're saying because of certain events will have passed at that point. Yeah. But
all right, so we'll keep an eye on that. Obviously, we'll be back with a new episode when more things are played out here, and we're only about, I guess, a month away from this. A month from tomorrow is the first week, or 4 weeks from tomorrow.
That's right. 4 weeks from tomorrow is the first Sunday of the NFL.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's coming close.
Yeah. And fantasy football. That's interesting too, because a lot of fantasy football leagues are, you're wondering if they're going to have them or not because.
Well, you have to put in rules, I guess. Of,
If
the season ends prior to this week, what's it going to happen?
We could talk about in the future episode, maybe a little fantasy preview.
Yeah, we could do that.
Fantasy preview. But so that's again before we sign off. As we remind you always, check us out on Twitter at PressBoxPod. We always tweet the links to the episodes, but tweet at us if you want us to cover a certain topic or have any thoughts. If we have any poll questions, be sure to interact with those as well. And we'll see you in the next episode of the PressBox Podcast.